We got ghosts that walk around the nude. We have a hotel that used to be a hospital. This is a creepy list. If you're ever in Texas, check some of these places out, will ya? I don't think it can get any creepier than a hotel that used to be a hospital. Forget just a single room. Every room at the Emily Morgan Hotel in San Antonio is said to be haunted. If you go here, expect some eerie stuff to happen. There are certain floors said to be more active than others, though. Guests on the 11th floor have reported seeing a woman in a hospital gown ambling through the hallway late at night, often weeping. Then she'll disappear after walking into one of the rooms. Late at night, guests will also hear what sounds like a hospital gurney being rolled down the hallway. Guests on the 9th floor will often say they hear their toilet seats lifting and slamming shut on their own, and whispers and murmurs will be heard from unoccupied rooms on the floor. Dark humanoid shapes are often spotted on the 7th floor. Ghosts like to sing on the 3rd. But the creepiest thing said to go on at the Emily Morgan has to do with the elevators. They like to do their own thing. Sometimes they'll just go past the floor that guests press, which is annoying, but most disturbingly, they'll head straight for the basement, which during the building's hospital days was the morgue.
Located in the heart of Austin lies the Driskill Hotel, which is home to an incredibly aggressive ghost, Jesse Driskill himself. The hotel was built by Jesse in 1886 using ill-gotten funds. He was a terrible racist, a womanizer, and an aggressive drunk. Also, he had a gambling problem. One night, he bet his hotel in a poker game, and he lost. He spent the rest of his life miserable and often swearing revenge on the new owners of the hotel, and apparently, when Driskill died, he got that revenge. Many people have claimed to have been woken up at 3 a.m. only to see Jesse Driskill standing in their rooms looking out the window and smoking a cigar. And apparently he gives off a bit of an uneasy feeling, which is understandable because he was horrible. Of course, Jesse is not the only ghost known to haunt the hotel. There is also the ghost of a jilted bride who took her own life after her fiance decided he no longer wished to marry her. And the ghost of another young woman, the daughter of a high-profile politician who took quite the tumble down the hotel stairs and died upon reaching the ground floor. She is said to haunt the stairwell, as well as a painting in one of the rooms on the 5th floor. As for the ballroom, it's said to be frequented by the ghost of the late President Lyndon Johnson and his wife, Lady Bird. It seems there's a ghost for everyone at this place.
One of the most haunted hotels in the entire state of Texas is the Sheraton Gunter Hotel in San Antonio, and room 636 is said to be particularly eerie. A gruesome death happened in that room, and according to the staff and many guests who've checked into it, the victim has never truly left. So this hotel is on the National Register of Historic Places. There is a lot of history here. The building's gone through a number of renovations and has changed ownership multiple times, but it's existed in some form since 1837. In 1909, it was renovated into what you see today, the Sheraton Gunter Hotel. There are multiple ghosts said to lurk in the hotel, but the creepiest activity goes on in room 636. Sure, you'll get all your typical ghostly activity, but the backstory is the truly horrific part here. In 1965, a man named Walter Emmerich checked into the hotel, staying in room 636. Witnesses would report having seen the man chatting it up with a pretty blonde woman who suddenly went missing. On the day Emmerich was supposed to check out, the maid arrived at his room late in the afternoon and entered, but it wasn't empty. He was found sitting on the bed. There were red stains everywhere, covering the walls and the sheets. No body was ever found, but there were long blonde hairs in the sheets and more stains lining the inside of the bathtub and the toilet. Emmerich fled the scene. Police caught up with him at another hotel. As soon as they arrived, though, he took his own life, taking all the secrets as to what really happened that day with him. But police did some digging, and it turned out he'd argued with a store clerk weeks before because they didn't carry a large enough meat grinder to suit his needs. Put two and two together.
When thousands of people die unexpectedly due to natural disaster, one can only assume that at least some of them will stick around to haunt the place. In this case, the place is Galvez Hotel, located in Galveston, Texas. On September 8th of 1900, a hurricane tore through the city of Galveston, devastating it and claiming the lives of 8,000 of its residents. 11 years later, the Galvez Hotel was built directly on top of the grounds where so many people had lost their lives just a few years prior. It is believed that those are the spirits that haunt the Galvez Hotel. Also, that as the hotel grows, so do its permanent residents. Each time a body is unexpectedly uncovered during a building renovation, people think that its spirit becomes trapped in the hotel along with the rest of the ghosts already residing there. But ironically, perhaps the most active ghost on the premises is not the ghost of someone who died in the hurricane, but rather someone who took her own life in the hotel after learning that her husband had become lost at sea during another hurricane that took place 15 years later in 1915. She is known to mess with electronic keys and create intense cold spots in the hotel, and has sometimes been seen wandering around the halls looking for her lost love. What's really sad is that after she took her life, her husband actually came back from sea. He never died, and he had to come back and find out that his wife was dead instead.
The Servant Girl Annihilator, the Austin Axe Killer, the Midnight Assassin, these were all names given to one of the earliest serial killers in the United States, an unidentified assailant who terrorized Austin, Texas between 1884 and 1885, 3 years before Jack the Ripper. The killer would attack his victims while they slept in their beds, hacking them up with an axe. The majority of his victims were mainly black women. The spree only stopped when additional police were hired to patrol the streets at night and residents formed their own vigilance committee. In total, the Servant Girl Annihilator was responsible for 8 deaths. He also severely injured 6 other women and 2 men. But the killer was never caught or identified. There were all kinds of theories floating around at the time. Some local voodoo practitioners believed that he had the power of invisibility, because no dogs in the homes or surrounding areas where he'd attacked had barked. He seemed to just almost move entirely silently. And in 1888, after Jack the Ripper had killed Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, another theory came about that the Austin Axe Killer and Jack the Ripper were actually the same guy. Carl Eugene Watts isn't a name that usually comes up in the lists of the worst American serial killers in history, but he's actually one of the most prolific. Born in 1953 in Killeen, Texas, Watts began his spree in 1974. He'd kidnap his victims from their homes and torment them for prolonged periods before finally killing them, usually by strangulation, bludgeoning, or drowning. Most of his victims were young white women who he described later in court as having, quote, evil eyes. He'd attack in different jurisdictions, often crossing into different states. He became known as the Sunday Morning Slasher and operated for about 8 years before finally being caught. Police weren't able to connect him to every killing he was suspected of carrying out, which could be over 100, but he did receive a life sentence, dying in prison of prostate cancer in 2007. On December 13th, 1990, a lady of the night, Mary Lou Pratt, was found dead in the Oak Cliff neighborhood in Dallas. She'd been killed with a firearm, but the most disturbing part, both of her eyes had been carefully removed. Then just 2 months later, another woman of the night, Susan Peterson, was found dead just outside of Dallas. Once again, her eyes had been carefully surgically removed. There was obviously a pattern now, and the assailant became one of the most wanted criminals in the state. Finally, just 1 month later, a third woman was found dead, lying on her side near a school. Once again, no eyes. A major breakthrough in the case came when a woman tipped off the police about a man named Charles Frederick Albright, who was known to have a strange fascination with eyes, and he'd also known the first victim, Mary Lou Pratt. A number of other courtesans said that Albright had been violent with them, so this was enough to get a search warrant. In Albright's home, police found that he'd removed the eyes from several photographs and dolls. He also had a history with the law going back to when he was just a teenager, mostly for robbery. He was only ever tied to one of these killings officially, but it's pretty clear he was responsible for all 3. He was sentenced to life without parole and died in prison in 2020. Dean Corll, aka the Candyman. He operated between 1970 and 1973, known to have killed a minimum of 28 young men in Houston and Pasadena. He'd lure his victims by offering them a ride, or he'd invite them to a party. Now, it's easy to say don't get into a car with a stranger, but the thing is, Corll would acquaint himself with a number of his victims before picking them up and taking them to his home, where he'd torment and kill them. And if he didn't know them himself, they'd be friends or acquaintances of his accomplices. Yeah, he didn't operate alone. He had two young men, David Owen Brooks and Elmer Wayne Hendley, helping him. Once his victims were in his home, he'd give them various substances until they'd pass out. Then he'd handcuff them to his bed, have his way with them, or torment them until finally taking their lives. Sometimes this would be drawn out for days. Well, it finally came to an end when one of his accomplices, Elmer Wayne Hendley, grabbed Corll's firearm and turned it on him. Hendley told him, "You've gone far enough, Dean. I can't go on any longer. I can't have you kill all my friends." Corll began stepping towards Hendley, daring him to shoot, not believing he would, but Hendley did. Corll tried to run out of the room, but Hendley fired 3 more times, killing him instantly. Good riddance. Janine Jones was a nurse who worked with young patients, and this makes her case incredibly disturbing because a nurse is just the last person you'd be expecting to intentionally cause you harm. She's believed to have caused the deaths of around 60 young patients between 1970 and 1982. She did this by administering unneeded substances like dioxin and heparin into her patients. She started her career at Bexar County Hospital in San Antonio, but people started getting suspicious when a larger than normal number of young patients were dying under her care. Now, instead of reporting her, the hospital just quietly kind of let her go to avoid bad publicity and potential lawsuits, which is insane. Then Jones found a job at a pediatrician's clinic in Kerrville. Luckily, her suspicious behavior didn't go unchecked there, though. A doctor discovered she had been accessing dangerous amounts of succinylmethonium chloride. Eventually, in 1985, she was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Joe Ball became known as the Butcher of Elmendorf and the Alligator Man. This case goes back to the 1930s in Texas. Joe Ball was a former soldier who turned to bootlegging after World War I and later opened a saloon when Prohibition ended. And behind his saloon, he kept a pond with 6 alligators, where he would sometimes feed them live cats and dogs for entertainment purposes. That's already evil on its own, but it seems it just wasn't satisfying Joe Ball's thirst for cruelty because things went even further. Women in the area, including his very own wife, began to disappear. In 1938, 2 county sheriffs came to question Ball about the missing women, and he panicked, ending his own life with a pistol. After Ball's death, his handyman Clifford Wheeler came forward and confessed to helping Ball dispose of the bodies of 2 women by feeding them to his alligators. It's suspected that Ball may have been responsible for the deaths of up to 20 women. The Baker Hotel in Mineral Wells is notorious for a terrifying ghost that's said to haunt the entire 7th floor, and the spirit of a bellhop who was cut in half in an elevator accident. The hotel is closed for renovations right now. It sat abandoned for a while, but it's reopening in 2026. For decades, though, guests would tell stories about their encounters with the Mistress Baker and the ghostly torso of the bellhop, amongst other ghosts. This place was, and will hopefully continue to be, pretty active when it's reopened. The mistress haunts the entire 7th floor. She was the mistress of a man named T.D. Baker, who was also said to haunt the hotel. The woman jumped to her death from the 7th floor, and ever since her death, guests would report seeing, hearing, or feeling her presence. Literally. Apparently she's a pretty touchy-feely ghost, especially with male guests. People would often spot her nude as well, so maybe not the worst time. Then there's the bellhop ghost, though, said to appear as a disembodied torso. So call me crazy, but I think I'd take the nude mistress over this guy. Douglas Moore was a young worker at the hotel who arrived early for work one day in 1948. So to entertain his friends, he started messing with the service elevator, jumping in and out when it was still moving. The safety features weren't to the standard we have today, and his legs got trapped in the doors of the rising elevator. You can kind of picture what happened. His legs became separated from his body when the elevator reached that next floor. It's pretty horrific.
That was fun. What about a hotel built directly on top of the Alamo battlefield, specifically the Crockett Hotel located in San Antonio, haunted by the ghosts of some 193 soldiers who died during the Battle of the Alamo that took place in 1836. Many people who have stayed at the Crockett have reported seeing a man in a dark blue jacket that resembles the uniforms worn during the battle stalking the hallways of the hotel. The sounds of disembodied footsteps outside of rooms have also been known to keep guests up at night. Not only that, but apparently the curtains and elevators in this hotel tend to have a mind of their own, opening and shutting at their leisure and messing around with guests by stopping on random floors. Luckily, they have yet to someone in half, but you never know.
If you ever find yourself in Marathon, Texas, the Gage Hotel may be a place you want to check out. It's got a nice pool, which you'll probably be itching to get into to cool off in the Texas desert heat. And if you're a fan of animal skulls and taxidermy, you might like some of the decor. Just don't stay in room 10 if you prefer to avoid encounters with the dead. The hotel opened in 1927, built by a man named Alfred Gage, who died just a year later. Unsurprisingly, he's said to remain in the hotel to this day. And there are said to be other ghosts too. Guests will report seeing figures walking through the hallways or sitting on the porch only to disappear after making eye contact. Apparently, a lot of guests try to avoid staying in room 10 though, saying they've woken up in the middle of the night with an apparition in antique clothing pacing around in their room.
The Magnolia Hotel is home to 13 permanent guests, many of which either died or were killed in the hotel. You can tell when they show up, not because you can see them, but because you can smell them, hear them, and feel them as well. When they walk by you, you can feel their bodies brush against your arms, and you can sometimes feel the arms of younger ghosts wrap around your legs in a hug as their laughter floats up through the air. Luckily, the majority of them are friendly, because if they have that much control over the realm of the living to make you feel their touch, I can only imagine what kind of damage these spirits could cause if they were spiteful or nude. There was one instance, however, where a spirit decided to show itself to a worker of the hotel. You see, when the new owners purchased the property, they realized that a lot of plumbing work had to be done, and in order to do it, they would actually have to dig a tunnel under the hotel. They hired a tunneler, he came, he dug, everything was fine, until the day they decided it was time to fill the tunnel back in. That day, the tunneler ventured under the hotel to go about business as usual, when all of a sudden he let out a guttural, terrified scream. When he emerged from the darkness, he looked as pale as a ghost, and then he explained why. During his final walk around, someone had actually tapped him on the shoulder, addressed him by name, and then when he turned around, he was staring into the dead eyes of a woman, staring straight back into his soul before disappearing into the dark.
The Menger Hotel in Alamo boasts a pretty famous ghost. Theodore Roosevelt. Yeah, forget spotting the ghost of some poor sap. Why not share a drink at the bar with the ghost of a former president? But Teddy Roosevelt isn't the only spirit said to stalk this place. The hotel was built in 1859, so suffice to say, there's a lot of history here and a lot of ghosts. Some will say as much as 32. One of the most frequently spotted is the ghost of a former chambermaid named Sally White, who was killed by her husband. Sally's a pretty fun ghost, often said to play pranks on the staff. There's a woman in a blue dress, often seen knitting in the lobby. She has a habit of vanishing into thin air, so people kinda think she may not be alive. There's also the spirit in the kitchen who likes to move utensils. All the ghosts here are said to be relatively friendly, but I don't know, you might get a little creeped out.
If dolls creep you out, you might want to look away, because this is the doll room of the Jefferson Hotel turned house, and I swear to God, it looks like something straight out of a nightmare. Jeremy Jones and his wife bought the hotel in 2020, and they decided to live there along with their daughter McKenna and their young son. They knew the hotel was haunted when they bought it, but it didn't bother them until one night when it did. Because of the popularity of the haunted hotel, urban explorers were known to attempt break-ins, likely because they were unaware that anyone actually lived there. Because of this, Jeremy decided to trick the house out with some motion sensor cameras that alerted him every time motion was detected in the house. One night, an alert went off. Jeremy looked at the cameras and immediately told his wife to call 911 because there was someone walking through their hallway near room 19, the most famous room of the hotel due to the fact that a woman then took her life there by jumping off of the 4-poster bed. You guys can kind of get what I'm talking about here. Jeremy then scoured the house, looking in all corners, but no one was there. And so, feeling like he was going crazy, he decided to double check the video, this time paying close attention, and when he did, he noticed that the body he saw in the hallway was actually more of a shadow, and it was also slightly see-through. It walked up to room 19 and then disappeared straight through the wall, and that's when he realized that what he had seen was not actually an intruder, but rather a ghost, and likely the ghost of room 19.
Thank God this next guy was put to death. Anthony Allen Shore, a complete and utter sicko. He mainly operated in Houston, forcing himself on several young women and girls between 1986 and 1995. He would strangle his victims before dumping their bodies. He wasn't investigated until 1998, when he was convicted of harming his own 2 daughters. He was required to provide DNA to authorities, who were then able to link him to victims of his then unsolved crimes. After 11 hours of interrogation, Shore had given authorities everything they needed. It took the jury less than an hour to decide to put Anthony Allen Shore to death, and in 2004, he was put down by lethal injection. Edward Harold Bell was born in 1939 in southern Texas. He was responsible for a long list of disturbing crimes, but most notably for having killed 11 girls throughout Houston, Galveston, Webster, and Dickinson between 1971 in 1977. He revealed these crimes in 1998 in a series of letters, which he sent to prosecutors in Galveston and Harris counties. The cases had been unsolved at the time, and the details Bell outlined matched the circumstances of the cases. The first killing Bell detailed took place in 1971. He killed 2 girls in Galveston, Debbie Ackerman and Maria Johnson, dumping their remains close to a deserted bridge. The 2 had been reported missing after accepting a ride from a man in a white van. At the time, Bell had owned a white van. Bell was never convicted for any of the killings he detailed in these letters, but he was already in prison for having killed a Marine named Larry Dickens, who had been attempting to restrain him after having flashed several young women from inside his car. And it's worse than that, but I can't really go into details here, nor would I really want to. Now, he'd actually managed to escape this incident and was a wanted fugitive. He wasn't caught until an episode of Unsolved Mysteries aired about the case, and someone who knew Bell tipped off the police. Angel Resendiz, aka the Railroad Killer, was on the FBI's most wanted fugitives list before finally surrendering to Texas authorities on July 13th of 1999. He carried out at least 23 killings while train hopping across the southern US and Mexico between 86 and 99. Resendiz would hop on freight trains traveling from one place to another and would often target people living near railway tracks. He would break into homes or attack people he encountered, leaving just a trail of violence in his wake. And what made Resendiz particularly dangerous was his ability to evade capture, because he was constantly moving and crossing state lines. Law enforcement agencies across different states really struggled to coordinate and apprehend him. And an extra creepy thing about him was that he liked getting to know his victims after killing them, usually looking at their driver's licenses and other forms of ID, and then taking sentimental items from their homes. He was a real creep. His reign of terror finally ended in 1999, and he died of lethal injection in Huntsville, Texas in 2006. The Phantom of Texarkana, the Phantom Killer, the Phantom Slayer. He has many monikers, but his real identity is still a complete mystery. The Phantom Killer stalked young couples in the Texarkana region between February 22nd and May 3rd of 1946. Each attack targeted young couples in isolated spots on weekend nights. The attacks occurred every 3 to 4 weeks. In the first attack on February 22nd, Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean Larry were parked in a secluded area when a man wearing a white cloth mask approached them. He ordered them out of the car, hit Jimmy on the head with a firearm, and forced himself on Mary using the barrel of his firearm. Luckily, both Jimmy and Mary survived this attack. In the second attack on March 24th, Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore were found dead in Griffin's car. They'd been shot outside the car and then placed back inside. The third attack on April 14th involved Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker. Martin was found shot multiple times. Booker was found shot twice, both with the same type of pistol used in the previous attack. The final attack on May 3rd resulted in the deaths of Virgil and Katie Starks in their home. Katie had actually taken 2 bullets to the face, but had managed to run out of the home and get help. That was the last attack, but not because the assailant was caught. For some reason, he just stopped. The case has never been solved.
Number 10, Bragg Road, Saratoga. The Big Thicket in southeast Texas is a dense forested area that runs along the Alabama border, and there are very few roads that cut through it. One of the most infamous is Bragg Road. In 1904, the road was built as a rail line to connect the now abandoned town of Bragg to the now thriving Saratoga. While the rails have long since been torn up, some ghostly reminders of the past still remain. When you drive down this lonely 8-mile long dirt road at night, you, like thousands of others before you, are sure to see what are known as the ghost lights. Basketball-sized orbs of light that float and dance through the air, even changing in color according to some. There are a few stories on what these lights actually are. The most popular story is that a tragedy occurred on a midnight train run. The conductor, sleep-deprived from a long journey through the state, needed some fresh air to wake himself up. He stuck his head out the window, and in a freak accident, he was decapitated by a tree. And now his spirit is wandering the road, searching for his lost head. The other prevailing theory is that the light is a ghostly lantern belonging to a groom whose bride left him at the altar. He went searching for her in the forest at night, but has still never found her to this day. Number 9, Baker Hotel, Mineral Wells. Mineral Wells is known for its, you guessed it, mineral-rich water. In the 1880s, people would travel from all over Texas to drink some, and it supposedly had healing powers and could cure almost any ailment. And with that kind of tourist attraction, you need somewhere for all of these folks to stay. And so, in 1929, the Baker Hotel was opened. With 14 floors and 450 rooms, it was the biggest hotel for miles, and it used the mineral water as a draw for all sorts of people. To this day, workers and visitors alike find small things missing from their pockets or bags while touring the grounds, and workers have later found them on the floor in the Baker Suite, the room where the owner lived and died. They also report the smell of cigar smoke in the air, another habit of Mr. Baker, further proving his presence. But there are also some less friendly spirits here, notably that of the chopped bellhop, who lost his life in a freak elevator accident that saw his top half removed from the bottom half of his body. He's seen floating sans legs and screaming to be made whole again. Workers recommend you stay away, lest you meet the same fate. Known for its programs in engineering, technology, and agriculture, Texas A&M is one of the most highly regarded universities in the state. But the engineering building is home to not only future engineers, but the spirit of a former worker. In 1959, Roy Sims was the foreman for the meat locker in what was then the Animal Industries building. He was showing his assistant some tips on butchering bacon, and when the assistant stepped out to get them both some coffee, the knife slipped and Sims accidentally sliced his leg, severing his femoral artery in the process. The assistant returned to see Roy bleeding out on the floor and called an ambulance, but it was too late, and he passed away. Students and faculty alike report strange happenings in the building to this day. Noises and crashes, cool breezes when all the windows and doors are shut, and even objects moving or being out of place. And many attribute this to the ghost of Roy Sims just trying to get back to work. Number 7, Lake Highlands High School, Dallas. Imagine being back in high school, and during a rehearsal for the school play, the lights suddenly go out, and when they come back on, costumes have moved, props have crashed to the floor, and you see a ghostly apparition rise back up to the rafters. This is exactly what some students and faculty have reported at the Dallas High School. Reportedly, the ghost is that of a former student, Elizabeth, who took her own life jumping from the roof of the auditorium. While many attribute the cold spots and strange noises to the wind, there is no denying that there was a student named Elizabeth who attended the school around the same time the urban legend takes place and passed away, though the cause remains unclear. Number 6 on our list, the Ritz Theater in Corpus Christi. While there are no accounts of specific deaths associated with what was once South Texas's most beautiful theater, there are certainly enough ghostly happenings to make anyone's skin crawl. Paranormal investigators have reported that while walking through the now crumbling building, you can feel cold spots, hear voices, and see orbs floating through the air, some of which they've actually been able to catch on camera. Perhaps these are spirits who never managed to move on, or maybe they're happy right where they are, enjoying a pleasant night out at the theater in the afterlife. We won't know until somebody asks. Number 5, Jefferson Hotel, Jefferson. Originally built in 1851 as a cotton warehouse, the Jefferson Hotel has had haunting stories for decades. To this day, workers who were once skeptical of spirits have been converted to believers after dishes have gone flying, phantom footsteps were heard, and the front switchboard lit up as though the rooms were talking to each other, even when the hotel was closed to guests. Many attribute this to the ghost of Elizabeth, common ghost name I guess, who took her own life in the hotel after her soon-to-be husband sent a note that he would not be coming to the wedding. This has been verified by newspapers to have happened in the 1870s, and there have been sightings of a woman in white roaming the halls of the hotel ever since. Number 4. The Grove, Jefferson. This house, built in 1861, has had many owners over the years, and most would agree that the place is cursed. Since its construction, most of the owners of the house have experienced some sort of tragedy. The original owner lost his cotton factory due to a freak flood, and a lynch mob committed horrible atrocities on the properties, where 4 freed slaves were brutalized and hung from trees on the property. The spirits of these men are said to be the most active spirits on the property. Later owners saw multiple family members take their own lives on the property, and some developed rare diseases. The spirits here are quite restless, and there are reports abound of books flying off shelves, mirrors shattering, voices telling people to do horrible things to themselves, and full-on ghostly apparitions that appear and disappear at will. All of these things show that the Grove definitely belongs on this list. Number 3. The Black Swan Inn, San Antonio. There is no relation to the 2010 film here, but the strange happenings have messed up people's minds just as much as Natalie Portman's characters was. The land that the inn now stands on has major ties to indigenous peoples from some 7,000 years ago, and is also a former battle site for the war between the Texan and Mexican army in 1842. But 35 years later, a dairy farm was founded on the land by a German immigrant. The blood-soaked soil here seems to be a bad place to build, as tragedy struck many who lived on the land. The farmer's wife passed away from cancer she developed shortly after moving in, and 2 years later, he decided to join her by taking his own life. Soon after, the property was purchased by 2 families and renamed the White Gables. However, at the age of 38, one of the new owners, Jolene Street, also passed away due to cancer, and like the owners before them, her husband hung himself in the bedroom. The inn that now stands has had reports of the spirits of the former owners wandering the halls with their necks broken, pushing guests off of their beds, and generally getting up to no good. No matter which way you slice it, this property seems cursed. Number 2. The Hill House, Mineral Springs. In part 2, I talked about the haunted Baker Hotel in Mineral Springs, but it seems that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, because just behind the Baker Hotel lies one of the most haunted places in Texas, the Hill House. Many people stay in this house attempting to witness paranormal activity, and most of them get more than they bargained for, and don't make it through the night without leaving terrified. The owners of the house, who purchased it in 2017 knowing its haunted history, rent it out to individuals and paranormal research teams looking to witness something terrifying. And apparently about 50% of them, including the professionals, leave within the first night. This is due to a spirit or entity that resides here named Toby, who growls loudly in your ear to get out, knocks things over, slams doors, and even gets violent. Videos show all sorts of terrible things happening to people who stay here, like a woman who was taunting the spirits, trying to make something happen, being viciously pulled off of her bed, leaving her bruised. And when she returned a year later, for some reason, she was scratched by something invisible in the room so badly that blood leaked through her shirt. Whoever Toby is, it seems like he doesn't want anyone else to come into his house and will do anything to keep them out. Number 1. Old Town Spring. While the rest of the entries on this list and my other 2 videos have had some terrifying places, our number 1 spot belongs to an entire town that is haunted, and some even say cursed. Allegedly, in the 1700s, a curse was cast by members of the Acokisa tribe on the town and its people who stole their land and killed their kin. And this curse has followed the town all the way through history, continuing even today. Every building in this small town has a haunting story, and I'll share a few of them with you now, but I encourage you to look this up because there are so many more that I just can't get to today. The Whitehall House was built in 1895 and has since been converted into a funeral home, and they have a special room upstairs designated as the Ghost Room, where the spirits of the dead who haunt the building can reside. Figures are seen walking through the door, dancing on the balcony, and heard inside. One of the previous owners decided to renovate the room and experienced, quote, violent spirit activity, and it took years for the ghosts to calm back down. There are now 2 new clauses in the lease agreement for the building. The Ghost Room is not to be disturbed, and you can't break the lease due to a haunting. Many of the buildings in town can be seen with trees growing closely and even through some of the buildings. And allegedly, the curse placed upon the town ensured that if anyone cut down any trees, they would experience a terrible fire. And this has happened inexplicably many times to many different buildings in the town, and some quite recent. There is also a hanging tree where a judge sentenced more than 60 people to death, which is an insane rate, even by the standards of any time. And the old ice house, which was used to store corpses waiting to be sent to the funeral home, has a heavy energy, and everything goes quiet when you get near it. And it's burned down countless times. You know, with all of these creepy things going on throughout the years, it is no wonder people think Old Town Spring is cursed, and a no-brainer that it ended up #1 on this list, and it might even be above the #1s in part 1 and 2. Let me know what you think in the comments below.
Starting off our list today, we have the Aggie bonfire collapse of 1999. The Aggie bonfire was at one time a long-standing tradition at Texas A&M University. Each year around Thanksgiving, the bonfire was made to celebrate the university's annual football game. At first, the bonfires were small and unorganized events, but eventually it turned into a whole spectacle, and in 1969, the school even set a world record for having the largest bonfire. But all of that came to an end in 1999 when, during the construction of the bonfire, which was made out of wooden debris, it collapsed, killing 12 adults studying at the university and 1 former student, as well as severely injuring 27 others. After that, the bonfire celebration was banned from the campus. However, in 2002, the tradition started up again, but off campus and unsanctioned. Next up, we have Hurricane Ike, which in 2008 devastated parts of Texas, caused the death of over 80 people, and injured hundreds more. Although a warning was issued prior to the hurricane reaching the city, over 140 residents failed to evacuate the Texas Gulf Coast danger zones, likely due to fear of traffic jams. Winds of 110 miles per hour touched down in Texas in the morning of September 13th, causing massive waves which tossed boats out of the water and onto land with ease and damaged many houses along the shoreline. Not only that, but the hurricane caused a massive power outage that left somewhere between 2.8 to 4.5 million people without electricity for weeks up to months. In order to survive, many people had to climb trees, punch holes right through their attic ceiling in order to gain access to higher ground, and cling to floating debris so as to not get swept under by the rising waters. When the storm finally died down, an estimated 1,000 homes had been flooded in Texas, and the city of Galveston was declared uninhabitable. And the city of Houston imposed a week-long curfew for the safety of its citizens due to the power outage. Next up, we have the Sutherland Springs Church tragedy, which took place on November 5th of 2017. During a service at the First Baptist Church, a local man named Devin Kelly entered the place of worship and opened fire on its congregants. He killed 26 people and injured 22 others before being hit by a projectile fired from the weapon of another local resident. After being hit, Kelly hopped in his car and fled the scene. Police trailed behind Kelly for some time in a high-speed car chase, but at some point during which Kelly seemingly gave up. But instead of allowing himself to get arrested, he instead turned his weapon on himself and took his own life. The event went down in history as the deadliest mass killing carried out with a firearm in Texas history, and the deadliest in an American place of worship. After the incident, it came to light that the perpetrator, Kelly, had obtained DV charges prior to purchasing his weapon, which should have rendered him unable to do so. And so in 2021, a federal judge ruled that the federal government had been negligent and awarded surviving victims and the families of the deceased nearly $250 million. Next up, we have the Texas fertilizer plant explosion of 2013. On April 18th in West Texas, a massive explosion at the West Texas fertilizer plant caused the deaths of at least 15 people and severely injured at least 200 others, with the majority of the deaths caused by the incident being that of firefighters and first responders who had arrived on the scene shortly after being alerted of the explosion. The blast also damaged 350 homes in the surrounding area. The explosion was the result of a fire breaking out in the company's fertilizer and seed building, which then came into contact with ammonium nitrate, which triggered the blast. But how the fire started is is unknown. Investigators' theories go all the way from an electrical malfunction to arson. Further investigations also revealed that the plant had not disclosed that they had been storing ammonium nitrate on a facility sitting in such close proximity to nursing homes and learning centers, which had to be repaired and rebuilt after the blast, which was so intense it actually registered as an earthquake in West Texas and left a crater 10 feet deep and nearly 100 feet wide. Next up, we have the Waco Siege of 1993. During the early 90s, a religious cult known as the Branch of Davidians, led by David Koresh, took up residency in the Mount Carmel Center Ranch in McLennan County, Texas. But the police suspected that there was a little more going on than misguided worship inside the walls of the ranch, and so they obtained search warrants for the compound as well as arrest warrants for David Koresh and many of his disciples. Here's the thing, a reporter caught wind of this and accidentally tipped off the brother of Koresh that police were on their way, and so by the time police arrived at the cult's headquarters, David Koresh of the Davidians and his disciples were armed and ready. When police attempted to raid the compound, 4 officers died and 8 Davidians were also killed. But they forgot to search the premises, and so the FBI stepped in. On April 19th of 1993, the FBI launched a tear gas attack, and shortly after, the compound went up in flames, causing the death of 76 cult followers, including the death of David himself. While at first the FBI came under scrutiny for causing the fire, it was later revealed that the fire had been started in a different part of the building by the Davidians themselves. How narcissistic do you have to be to call your cult your name? Strange. Next on the list, we have the Columbia explosion, which resulted in the deaths of 7 individuals and a 29-month suspension of the NASA Space Shuttle program and a serious reevaluation of procedures. The event took place on February 1st of 2003 after the Space Shuttle Columbia had been sent to the Hubble telescope so that its team could perform a routine servicing of the telescope, in this case replacing an aging power control unit, removing and installing solar arrays, and conducting instrument upgrades. The mission seemed like a success until Columbia began its re-entry into Earth's atmosphere over East Texas, during which time the space shuttle disintegrated, ending the lives of all 7 astronauts aboard the ship. While NASA first insisted that the astronauts would have been either asleep or unconscious at the time of their re-entry into the atmosphere and would therefore have died peacefully and suddenly, it was later revealed that they were very much awake and very much aware of their impending doom. Next up, we've got another hurricane, Hurricane Harvey, which in 2017 devastated the Texas Gulf Coast, causing even more damage than that caused by Hurricane Ike back in 2008. The Category 4 Hurricane Harvey hit the Texas Gulf Coast on August 25th. In total, 100 deaths occurred as a direct result of the hurricane, as well as many other indirect fatalities, and thousands of people were displaced from their homes. The storm, which made landfall in San Jose Island, lingered over Texas for several days, causing widespread and prolonged flooding. The damages caused along the coast exceeded $155 billion US dollars. Much like during Ike, citizens living along the coast at the time of Hurricane Harvey were forced to reach the highest ground possible and had to survive on whatever foods or safe liquids they could find for days before they were rescued from the devastation. Harvey went down in history as the wettest tropical cyclone on record to hit not only Texas, but the United States as a whole to date. Next up, we have the Fort Hood killing, which took place at Fort Hood, now Fort Cavazos, a military base in Killeen, Texas. On November 5th of 2009, Nadel Hassan, a U.S. Army major and psychiatrist, opened fire at Fort Hood, killing 13 and injuring more than 30 others. This event went down in history as the deadliest terror attack to occur on an American military base, and for a while it was the deadliest attack in the United States since the September 11 attacks, until it was surpassed in 2015 by the San Bernardino attack in California. During the attack, Hassan himself was hit, resulting in him becoming paralyzed from the waist down. He was arraigned by military court and charged with 15 counts of killing in the first degree, as well as 32 other accounts of attempted killing. He was found guilty and sentenced to death, but the story doesn't end there. Days after the attack, it was discovered that the Joint Terror Task Force had been well aware of a series of emails between Hassan and a known security threat, Anwar al-Awlaki, which led to an internal investigation of the FBI. Next, we have probably one of the most infamous incidents of American history to ever occur in Texas. It's the assassination of JFK on November 22nd of 1993 at the Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. JFK, or John F. Kennedy, was the 35th president of the United States and just one of 4 to be killed while in office. He was riding in a presidential procession of vehicles with his wife Jacqueline, or Jackie Kennedy, when the former US president was hit in the head by a projectile fired from a handheld weapon off-site. He was rushed to the hospital but ultimately pronounced dead just 30 minutes after the incident. An official investigation into the death of JFK concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald had killed him and that he had acted alone. No reason was ever given, though, as to why Oswald might have wanted the president dead, as just 2 days after Oswald was accused of the act, he was killed by an American nightclub owner named Jack Ruby, who was sentenced to death for killing Oswald. And so there is no real way of knowing whether Oswald really did act alone or what his motives would have been in doing so. There's a lot of conspiracies surrounding the whole thing. If you guys want to see a video on that, you know where to let me know. And finally, to finish us off today, we have the Phillips Petroleum explosion of 1986. On October 23rd, the Phillips Petroleum Company suffered majorly after a series of explosions occurred at their chemical complex in Pasadena, Texas, near the Houston Ship Channel. The blasts were so bad, the first one actually registered as a 3.5 on the Richter scale, which is normally reserved for measuring the intensity of earthquakes. And the fires that broke out as a result of the explosion took 10 hours to get under control, likely due to the fact that the blast devastated many water pipes and fire hydrants in the area. The initial explosion, which led to the others in a devastating chain reaction that caused the death of 23 employees and the severe injuries of 314 more, was caused by a release of extremely flammable process gases used to produce plastic used in food containers. Lovely. Think about that the next time you're putting plastic in the microwave. PSA. The company was fined $5,666,200 by the United States Occupational Safe and Health Administration for their negligence that resulted in the fire. Not a good day in history for big plastic.
Number 10. White Rock Lake Park, Dallas. In 1943, the story of the ghost of White Rock was published in a Texas folklore publication, Backwoods to Border. The story goes that there was a young couple who was looking for somewhere they could be alone. They drove down a deserted road and parked on the shore of the lake. When they turned their headlights on, they saw someone walking towards them. A woman dressed in a white sheer dress who was soaking wet was coming closer and closer to their car. Concerned, they asked the woman if she was alright, and the woman then spoke and said, "I'm sorry to intrude, and I would not under any other circumstances, but I must find a way home immediately. My boat overturned, the others are safe, but I must get home." The couple agreed to take her home, and she gave them an address not too far away. As they drove off, the driver turned back to ask for some directions, but the backseat was empty and soaking wet. When they arrived at the address the woman in white gave them, a man answered the door, and when he was told what happened, he replied, "You are the third couple who's come to me with this story. 3 weeks ago, while sailing on White Rock Lake, my daughter drowned. Many sightings have been reported since." Number 9. The Moody Mansion, Galveston. Before I get to the next entry, make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so that I can keep bringing you the most amazing content. Before it was known as the Moody Mansion, it was the Willis Mansion. Built for Narcissa Willis in 1895, this 31-room mansion boasts a Romanesque architecture with ornate features like stained glass windows and hand-carved woodwork. She commissioned the house to be built against her late husband's wishes after he'd passed, spending the family inheritance in the process, something her 10 children did did not appreciate. Unfortunately, she didn't get to live there long since she passed away in 1899, and it was then purchased by the Moodys. In 1900, a hurricane destroyed much of Galveston and took the lives of some 6,000 people, but strangely, the mansion stayed standing, untouched. Perhaps it was the ghost of Narcissa keeping her prized possession safe? Visitors to the house constantly report faces and spectral images showing up in photographs taken in the house, prompting paranormal investigators to come here to do research. Number 8. San Fernando Cathedral, San Antonio. The oldest church in the entire state of Texas has stood tall for nearly 300 years, and in that time it's collected many spirits, some of whom were buried within the walls of the church themselves. When searching for paranormal activity here, one of the first things researchers often see is a white horse trotting in front of the cathedral, only to disappear soon after. It's said that the horse was a gift from an Apache tribe that was refused and killed. Other ghosts that walk the grounds include that of a man dressed in black clothes from the 18th century who follows tours and then suddenly disappears, as well as those of monks who can be seen and heard standing at the back of the pews during services. Number 7. Demon's Road, Huntsville. Formerly known as Bowden Road, this seldom traveled dirt road is creepy enough without the ghost stories. It's overgrown, has misshapen trees, and in the dark seems like something right out of a horror movie. But there is at least one notable spirit who haunts travelers who dare come through here. A boy on a tricycle with glowing eyes has been reported by many people riding down the road. He appears in the middle of the road and stares you down until you approach him, and once you do, a thick fog rises from the ground and he disappears. There's one more story about Demon's Road that I found super interesting though. Two friends heard that the road was haunted and decided to check it out for themselves, and as they drove down it in the middle of the night, the trees seemed to shift and shake, and then they arrived at their destination at the end of Demon's Road, which just so happens to be the next entry on our list. Number 6. Martha Chapel Cemetery. When the two men drove up to the cemetery, which was named after the first person who was buried there, Martha Palmer, moonlight was piercing through the clouds and lighting the headstones and epitaphs before them. They both got out to crack a few brews and explore the cemetery, but when the driver decided to pour some on one of the graves, a skeletal hand burst from the ground, grabbing at his ankle and dragging him into the dirt. His friend and passenger ran over to help, kicking at the zombie-like arm and dragging him away. After he was freed, the driver called out for them to escape, and when he got back to his car, he looked back, but didn't see his friend who supposedly just saved his life. He was actually still sitting in the passenger seat, asleep. And as he peeled out and drove back down Demon's Road, his passenger slumped over into his lap, and the driver realized that his friend had died. Allegedly, he passed away from a heart attack on the drive to the cemetery. And in 2018, a video surfaced from someone who was exploring the Google Street View of the area and saw a ghostly image appear inside the cemetery. A creepy, pale face of a boy was behind a tree in one shot and missing in the next. There was also a large black figure in the background that did not seem to be human. Spooky stuff. Number 5. Miss Molly's Hotel, Fort Worth. Originally built in 1910 as the Palace Rooms, Fort Worth's first bed and breakfast, Miss Molly's, has had quite the history. During Prohibition, it became a speakeasy called the Oasis. In the 1940s, it became a brothel known as the Galvez Hotel, and after that was shut down, it became Miss Molly's. There have been many reports of unwanted guests appearing here, most notably those of Jake the Cowboy and Josie King, the former madam of the brothel, both of whom are seen as full-body apparitions. Workers and visitors alike have witnessed them walking through locked doors, books being thrown, items disappearing and reappearing in random places, and strangely, change being neatly organized in certain rooms. In room 3, indents on the edge of the bed have appeared as though someone were suddenly sitting on it and shaking the bed while guests sleep. You know, I think Little Richard said it best. Good golly, Miss Molly. Number 4. Hendley Row, Galveston. One of the oldest still operating commercial buildings in the city, Hendley Row has seen many occupants throughout its time. Most notably, it was a watchtower during the American Civil War. Some have reported a soldier on the roof of the building at night watching out for Union Army members. There are also many spirits who appear soaked and wet from the 1900 storm that they and 12,000 others lost their lives in. However, my favorite story from this building is actually more recent. The manager of the market was gifted a photo of Dr. Wilbur, a man who had lived and died in the buildings many years before, and they decided to hang it in the market as a historical artifact. When Hurricane Ike hit the city in 2008 and left the building in 10 feet of water, damaging so much of the property, the picture remained unharmed. despite falling in the water. During their annual Day of the Dead celebration, the photo is included on the altar, along with many other objects and candles. With a 3-person rotation to ensure it's done, the candles are extinguished at night. Yet every year, the candles are mysteriously already burning the next morning. Number 3. Haunted Train Tracks, San Antonio. On a dark night in 1936, at the rail crossing on Shane Road just outside of San Antonio, a tragedy occurred which would rock the state to its core. An after-hours event at the local elementary school had many students staying late that night, and the school bus service was diverted till later in the evening. When it was time to go, students loaded up and headed home. Unfortunately for some, this would be their last ride. The bus had been working better than ever all evening, the bus driver noted, and suddenly it stalled out on the rail tracks. The driver tried and tried to restart the vehicle, but it was no use. Then suddenly a train appeared. Its lamp must have been out, and it was too late to move the bus, even if it was working. The driver began to carry students off the bus as fast as he could, but then the bus was hit by the train side on, and the driver was thrown from the window. 10 students survived, but many others didn't. After recovering from his injuries and leaving the hospital weeks later, the bus driver got in his car and returned to the rail crossing that night. Haunted by grief, he drove his car onto the tracks, turned it off, and hurled his keys into the night, determined to take his own life. And when he saw the train charging down the tracks, he suddenly felt the car rolling forward, all the way off the tracks and out of harm's way. When he inspected his car, he saw multiple sets of small handprints on the back, perhaps those of the students, not wishing for his life to be lost in the same way theirs had. Number 2. Hotel Galvez, Galveston. After the devastating hurricane in 1900 that left many dead and much of the town destroyed, Galveston decided to rebuild. And with that came the Hotel Galvez. Many spirits are said to be lurking the grounds, even to this day, but the most infamous of them all is Audra. In 1952, she was staying in room 501, while her fiancé was out at sea working on a cargo vessel. When news came from the company that their ship had sunk and all hands on board were lost, Audra decided to end her life in the hotel room that night. But a few days later, her betrothed returned to the hotel. Reports had been wrong and he had survived the shipwreck, and elated to see his fiancée, he threw open the doors to room 501 and saw her body. Distraught, he then took his own life, laying next to her on the bed. And finally, we reach your number 1 most suggested haunted place in Texas, Goatman's Bridge. This bridge in Denton once led to the homestead of a farmer, the Goatman, who was renowned for the quality of his farm's milk, cheeses, and meat. The former owner of the land never saw any such success while he operated the farm, and in a booze-fueled fit of jealousy, he attacked the farmer, put a rope around his neck, and threw him from the side of the bridge. He then returned to the homestead and burned it to the ground, taking the lives of the family and the livestock. When he returned to the bridge to check on his gruesome handiwork, he looked below only to see an empty noose. He then heard 3 loud metal clangs, like someone was knocking on the bridge. And then suddenly behind him, a large, ghostly man with a goat for a head appeared, put a noose around his neck, and threw him over the side of the bridge, taking revenge for himself and his family. Now they say that if you visit the old Alton Bridge at night and knock 3 times, you too will see the Goatman. But be warned, he does not like to be disturbed.
We have a small town in Texas that was once home to a lesser known but incredibly gruesome serial killer, Henry Lee Lucas, who claims to have killed over 3,000 individuals during his criminal career, which spanned from the 1960s all the way into the 1980s. Also known as the Confession Killer or Highway Stalker, Lee Lucas was born in Blacksford, Virginia, and at a young age lost his father to hypothermia, and so his mother was forced to raise him on her own. Clearly, Henry wasn't happy with this, as his mother was the first person he killed in 1960 in Michigan. He was sent to prison but only served 10 years due to overcrowding. And that's when he moved to Ringgold, Texas with his niece Frida Powell to work for a sick woman named Katie Rich, both of whom he would later kill. While he claimed to have ended the lives of thousands of individuals through restricting airways, impaling them with sharp objects, blunt force, and hit and runs, he was convicted of only 11 killings.
Texarkana is home to one of the creepiest cases in the state's history, the Texarkana Moonlight killer case. So this case was heavy inspiration for slasher movies that would come years later, along with tons of urban legends. The killer literally wore a sack with holes cut out for his eyes and would attack innocent couples while their cars were parked in an area called Lover's Lane. It's about as classic as it gets. So the first attack happened on February 22nd, 1946. A young couple, Jimmy Hollisand and his girlfriend Mary Jean Larry, were attacked by a man with a pillowcase over his head carrying a firearm. Jimmy was pistol whipped and very injured, and Mary was attacked, but the two lived. Many of the other victims wouldn't be so lucky though. He would attack 6 other people, and it all happened in a period of 10 weeks. The assailant became known as the Phantom of Texarkana, and the case was never solved.
Regular hospitals are bad enough, but abandoned and haunted hospitals definitely take the cake, so of course we had to include at least one on today's list. The Yorktown Memorial Hospital, located in Yorktown, Texas, between San Antonio and the Gulf Coast. It was built in 1951 to house and treat those suffering from substance abuse. When the hospital was abandoned in 1980, the living residents and staff members exited the building. But what about those who died during their time in the hospital? Well, it's said that they still inhabit the premises to this day. And no, I'm not talking about 1 or 2 patients who died while under the hospital's care. I'm talking about thousands, over 2,000 to be exact. So really, it's no wonder the place is extremely haunted. Honestly, I'm surprised it didn't open up some kind of gateway to hell and land a spot on the list in our last video. Check it out if you'd like. Those who have entered the building have reported feeling a strange rotting sensation and claim that they can feel the tormented soul's energies in the walls. Not only that, but many people have said they've heard screams and disembodied voices while inside, as well as seeing strange floating lights in the hallways, despite the fact that the building is ancient and has no electricity. If you've been, let me know your experience.
Now we move on to Kerrville, Texas, with the case of Janine Jones, a nurse who also terrorized San Antonio. What an absolute creep this woman is. Yes, she is still alive. She took the lives of an estimated 60 young patients in her care between 1970 and 1982. She'd inject patients with a variety of substances that would cause cardiac arrest. She first started working as a licensed vocational nurse at Bexar County Hospital in San Antonio in the pediatric intensive care unit. But hospital staff started realizing that an abnormal amount of young patients were dying in Jones's care. Now, here's where things get really infuriating. An investigation could have been carried out right there and then, and things could have ended here. But the hospital didn't want any negative attention, and they certainly did not want to be sued. So instead of alerting authorities, they asked all of their current LVNs to resign and then rehired exclusively registered nurses to take control of the pediatric ICU. This meant that Jones could just move on and start working at another hospital, which she did. So more young patients died at her hands at a pediatrician's clinic in Kerrville. There, a doctor finally found she'd been accessing lethal amounts of succinylmethonium chloride. So in 1985, she was finally convicted and is now serving life in prison.
Circling right on back to Yorktown, it appears as though this particular town is home to not only an incredibly haunted hospital, but also an incredibly disturbing creature known as a Wendigo. Although the creature is best described in Algonquin folklore, which is Canadian for my Americans on this channel, many locals of the town claim to have seen one of the beasts. Many people have compared the Wendigo to a skinwalker, as it is tall and lanky and somewhat humanoid, but can shapeshift and has been known to devour human flesh. And when a Wendigo finds the body of a deceased hiker, it will often inhabit it, and then turn to killing those who attempt to come into contact with its human exterior. Many people also claim to have seen the demon take the form of animals and follow and stalk them throughout the area. Stay safe out there in Wendigo.
Speaking of creepy creatures, Texas is also home to an entity known as Goatman, who stalks the old Alton Bridge connecting Denton and Copper Canyon. So the tale traces back to a black goat farmer named Oscar Washburn, who moved his family near the bridge. And Washburn earned a reputation as a very reliable businessman and was nicknamed the Goatman by locals. He even hung a sign on Alton Bridge pointing towards his home, proudly declaring this way to the Goatman. But in 1938, members of the local government who had ties to the Ku Klux Klan kidnapped Washburn from his family. They took him to the bridge, hung a noose around his neck, and threw him over the side. When they looked down, expecting to see him dead though, they found the noose completely empty. Now, locals warn that crossing the bridge at night without headlights, just as the Klansmen did, will summon the Goatman. People crossing the bridge will claim to spot ghostly figures, mysterious lights coming from the woods, and even physical encounters like being touched, grabbed, or having rocks thrown at them from some unseen force. Or of course a half-man, half-goat monster.
Next up, surprise, surprise, it's another creepy hospital. Worley Hospital in Pampa, Texas. The institution was opened in 1928 but closed its doors in the 1970s due to lack of revenue. After 40 years of sitting abandoned, the building has become quite a talking point for the town's locals, who claim that it is haunted by patients who died within its walls during its 42 years of operation. After many townspeople reported seeing a black silhouette in the window of the abandoned building, ghost hunters began to take interest. Those who have entered have been greeted with decrepit and decaying walls, ceilings, and floors that have been heavily vandalized. But it appears as though trespassers aren't the only ones to make their way through the empty halls of the once surgically specialized facility. Many of the patients who died within the building's walls, as well as a 25-year-old nurse who was poisoned while working at the hospital, are said to roam the grounds. People have reported seeing demonic creatures stalking them while exploring the floors of the hospitals, with the majority of the activity taking place on the 3rd floor, where surgeries would have been performed when the hospital was running. Oh, and the current owner of the grounds wants to renovate the building into a ministry. Coincidence? I do not think so.
League City, Texas is home to an area known as the Killing Fields. So there is an abnormally large list of people who have been found dead in this stretch of land surrounding Interstate Highway 45. And there are also a number of people who've gone missing from this area and have still yet to be found. And out of more than 30 cases, only a small handful have ever been solved. The place is such a hotspot for mysterious deaths that a task force, Operation Halt, was set up just to investigate these incidents alone. The first cases started cropping up in the 70s with the discovery of multiple bodies scattered throughout the area, and over the decades, law enforcement agencies have recovered the remains of numerous people, many of them young women. And it's not even clear if there's just one assailant responsible, a group, or if the area is just an ideal spot to kind of get rid of evidence. We really don't know. It's a complete mystery to this day.
And finally, we have a man with a thing for eyes. Stealing them, that is. It all started in the 1990s in a rural area of Dallas. Is it a town? Not really, but this case is pure evil, so listen up. During the 90s, SEX workers began turning up dead at an alarming rate, with one very striking thing in common. You guessed it, their eyes had been completely removed from their sockets. The killer was Charles Albright, also known as the Eyeball Killer. When he was young, Charles had quite the knack for taxidermy. He would stuff many animals a week, doing his best to make them look pristine, but there was one thing missing: eyes. His mother refused to buy glass eyes for the animals, and so instead Charles would use buttons. When he got a little older, he slept with an SEX worker, which led to him getting a transmitted infection. I feel like the pieces are starting to come together. His obsession with the eyes and his hatred for women of this certain profession grew exponentially over the years, and on December 13th of 1990, he took his first life. After violating the woman, he fired a projectile from a handheld weapon, execution style, into the back of her head and carefully removed the eyes of the victim with what has been described as surgical precision. Charles was convicted of 1 killing, but most likely committed at least 3. He was sentenced to death and was executed in August of 2022.
Number 4, Sam Bass's treasure. Alright, Sam Bass was this notorious outlaw during the late 1800s. He was known for his daring train robberies. According to the lore, Bass and his gang managed to accumulate quite a substantial fortune through their criminal activities, amassing a hidden treasure that, till this day, has never been fully recovered. The whereabouts of Bass's treasure has remained a mystery, fueling countless treasure hunting expeditions and inspiring countless stories and speculations, many believe that Bass buried his loot in various locations across Texas, particularly in the areas around Denton where he operated. Some claim that Bass left cryptic clues and treasure maps, teasing treasure hunters with the possibility of finding his hidden riches. Over the years, numerous treasure seekers have dedicated themselves to try and unravel the secrets of the whereabouts of his treasure. They have combed through historical records, studied old maps, and explored the Texas landscape in search of his stash. Despite their efforts though, the treasure has never been found. It's kind of like a Western version of One Piece. I love it. The thing is though, I think if someone did find it, would they report it? Or would they just kind of like keep it to themselves? I don't know. Maybe someone has found it. At number 3, we have the case of Lori Ruff. Lori Ruff was this woman with a seemingly ordinary existence, although she was always rather secretive about her past. And her husband, Blake Ruff, had a lot of questions, and as it would turn out, she wasn't exactly who she seemed. In 2010, she ended up taking her secrets to the grave after taking her own life, leaving behind a trail of these perplexing clues and unanswered questions. Blake Ruff discovered a lockbox in her closet that only added to his confusion surrounding her past. It seemed as if Lori previously went by the name Becky Sue Turner. But Becky Sue Turner was the name of a girl who had died in a house fire back in 1971. So Ruff was left in kind of utter shock, confusion. Who was this woman he'd married back in 2003? Investigators were on the case, and as it turned out, Becky wasn't her only other name. Lori was actually born as Kimberly McLean, who had gone missing in 1986. She had run away from home at 18 years old. The question still remains though, why did she leave home and how did she acquire the birth certificate of a girl who died in 1971. At number 2, we have the Marfa Lights. The mystery surrounding the Texas Marfa Lights has fascinated locals and visitors alike for decades. Nestled in the remote desert landscape near the town of Marfa, these unexplained phenomena manifest as strange floating orbs of light that appear in the night sky. Witnesses have described them as glowing orbs of various colors ranging from white, yellow to blue and red. The lights often dance and dart and hover in the distance, defying all conventional explanations. Numerous theories have been proposed, of course, to explain the origin of these lights, but none of them have actually been able to fully unravel it. Some speculate that they are the result of natural occurrences like atmospheric gases or reflections from distant headlights. Others attribute them, of course, to supernatural or extraterrestrial origin, believing that they are the work of ghosts or alien visitations. Skeptics argue that the lights are simply the, product of illusions or, misinterpretations. But there's quite the allure behind it, and it's led to the establishment of viewing areas and research centers dedicated to studying and observing them. Scientists, paranormal enthusiasts, and curious visitors flock to the region in search of answers. That's something I'd like to see. I might have to take a trip to Texas, find some treasure, see some cool lights. It'll be a good time. And finally, we have the Loveland UFO case. This case stands as one of the most compelling incidents in the history of unidentified flying objects, and unfolded on the night of November 2nd, 1957 in Loveland, Texas, when the multiple witnesses reported encountering a series of bizarre events involving unidentified flying aircraft or aircrafts. Throughout the night, several motorists reported their vehicles stalling and electrical systems failing as they observed a large, almost egg-shaped object hovering in the vicinity. The witnesses described the craft emanating a blinding light and this intense heat. The accounts of the Loveland UFO sightings were remarkably consistent too, with witnesses from different locations reporting similar experiences. Law enforcement officers and local authorities were flooded with these reports throughout the night, which really adds to the credibility of the events. However, when law enforcement officers did arrive on these scenes, the crafts had already disappeared. This case attracted the attention of the United States Air Force, leading to an investigation by Project Blue Book, the official US government program tasked with studying UFO reports. Despite their efforts though, no definitive explanation was ever provided. Skeptics have offered theories ranging from, again, atmospheric phenomena to maybe electrical disturbances, but others believe this is genuine extraterrestrial encounter. But others still believe it's aliens, which I also like that idea a lot more. There's just this consistency and the number of witnesses, which again, very interesting.
Starting us off at number 10, dog experiments. A few years back, PETA released a scathing expose on the Texas A&M University's laboratories. What was branded as a breeding program turns out to have been closer to a cruel experiment under the guise of science. It turns out that they had been actively lying about their dog breeding program and were actually using the dogs for cruel and painful experiments. Dogs under their care were deliberately bred to develop a crippling form of canine muscular dystrophy that prevented most of the dogs from walking, eating properly, or having any kind of quality of life. From there, they would use the dogs in experiments involving biopsies and these devices that stretched their muscle tissue, causing them not only incredible pain during the procedures, but ultimately forcing many of the dogs to be euthanized due to the toll it put on their bodies. Apparently, the university had been doing these kinds of experiments for nearly 40 years before PETA was able to put an end to it, and thankfully all of the dogs have now been rescued and are being sent to new homes. Next up at number 9, hepatitis. In the 1950s, one institution ran a very dark experiment that I honestly can't quite believe was able to happen even that long ago. The institution was for disabled people, specifically those deemed to have mental illnesses or mental disorders at that time. And due to the highly unsanitary conditions of this institution, many contracted hepatitis. You would think that this would maybe make them go, oh, maybe we should tidy up around here, protect those that are under our care, but that was not really their approach. Instead, Dr. Saul Krugman proposed an experiment to try and develop a vaccine. Now, while I can appreciate the thought that was behind his proposition, rather than testing on the already contracted citizens, they actually began purposefully infecting people with the disease to assist in the experiment. Now, don't get it twisted, there were many folks against this from the start, but ultimately parents of the admitted people gave their permission to infect them and use them in the study, so forth they went. It's kind of crazy to believe that someone would actually go along with that, but apparently they didn't seem to care too much about infecting disabled people with a deadly disease, so there you have it.
You hear Lake Worth monster, you're probably picturing a sea creature of some kind, but no, it's a Goatman. The creature is said to reside in Lake Worth, just outside of Fort Worth. It's described as this bizarre mix of a man and goat, but also has scales, so it's like a fishy man-goat. The legend dates back to July of 1969, when locals reported sightings of this half-human, half-goat creature perched on a cliff. A young couple who'd parked their car by the lake were the first ones to see the creature. They said it was massive, about 7 feet tall, and then more and more reported sightings came in, saying the goat creature would leap onto cars and hurl tires at people. Then in October of 69, a man named Alan Plaster snapped a photo of what he claimed to be the Lake Worth monster. Supposedly, this is it, and this photo started showing up in newspapers and magazines, which just fueled the stories even further until crowds were flocking to the lake at night. But whatever this thing was, if it really did exist, it was never found. The Lady of White Rock Lake. I'm sure Dallas locals will have heard of this one. White Rock Lake is about 20 minutes out of town, a nice getaway from the city, but there's a very spooky ghost story attached to it. As the legend goes, back in 1952, a tired couple found themselves driving home late one night after a party. The wife was dozing off when their car abruptly came to a halt. In the middle of the road was a woman in a torn white gown, drenched from head to toe. The husband offered her a ride, and she accepted. The wife was shocked at how icy the woman's touch was as she helped her into the back seat. They drove in silence until they reached the address that the woman gave them, an eerie, deserted house at the end of a desolate road. But when they turned to the back seat to speak to the woman, she was gone, leaving only a puddle of water behind. The couple was pretty freaked out, but figured maybe the woman had somehow gotten out of the car without them noticing, so they decided to knock on the door of the house. An old man answered the door, and when they described the woman to him, he told them the woman they had picked up was his daughter, but that she had drowned years ago in a boating accident. Ever since then, drivers have reported picking up a woman on the side of the road only for her to vanish before reaching her destination, always leaving a pool of water behind. The Frio River Valley is known for its own urban legend, the White Lady of Rio Frio. Maria Jimenez lived with her sister and brother-in-law, Gregorio, happily tending to her nieces and nephews on their ranch, but she dreamed of one day marrying and having children of her own. But Gregorio, despite being married, and married to Maria's sister no less, became infatuated with Maria. But when she rejected him, he flew into a rage and fatally shot her at her home later in the day. At her funeral, Maria's sister decided to dress her sister in her white wedding gown, as Maria never got to have a wedding of her own. It's said that Maria haunts the valley to this day, still wearing her sister's white wedding dress. But unlike a lot of tragic ghost tales like this, Maria isn't a vengeful spirit. She's just as caring and kind as she was in life. It's said she helps guide and comfort young people lost in the valley. Because she was unable to fulfill her own dream of starting a family, her spirit is said to care for the young people of her entire hometown. It's said you can spot her on misty nights, gracefully hovering over the water with her dress trailing behind her. The Lechuza is a creature from Mexican folklore, a large, part woman, part owl-like bird creature with dark magical powers. But in Robstown, Texas, in 1975, this creature became one of the biggest urban legends in the Lone Star State. Back in October of that year, the police started getting some unusual calls. People were reporting sightings of what they described as a monstrous bird. In Mexican folklore, the Lechuza is believed to be a witch who can take on the form of an owl, but she keeps her human face and hair. Depending on who you ask, she could be the size of a regular owl or as big as a person. But the reports didn't specifically mention La Lechuza at the time. That connection wasn't made until later. Instead, they described something that sounded just like a cross between a bird and a human. In Robstown, witnesses said it stood anywhere from 2 to 6 feet tall, with a bird body but a human-like face. There were also supposed sightings later on in Banquet and Alice. By January of the following year, folks in the valley were reporting encounters with a massive bird. In San Benito, 2 police officers even saw a bird with a wingspan that was apparently 10 to 12 feet long, flying over a lagoon. A radio station even put up a reward for capturing the big bird alive. And in Brownsville, a man named Alverico Gajardo told reporters he came face to face with a big bird right outside his door about 4 feet tall, saying it had a beak like a spear and eyes as big as silver dollars. He described his experience, saying, "That animal is not from this world. I was scared." Next, we have the Donkey Lady. A lot of scary lady urban legends in Texas. Any Texans in the audience want to explain why that is? The Donkey Lady is probably one of the most famous urban legends in the state, though. There are a few different versions of the tale, but they all center around a donkey-human hybrid. One version says a woman was badly burned, leaving her with hands that looked like hooves, and a face resembling a melted donkey. Awful. Another story goes that she was a woman who adored her pet donkey. When the donkey was taken away and mistreated by neighbors, they ended up drowning both the woman and her beloved animal, and now her spirit is said to linger near the Donkey Lady Bridge in San Antonio, Texas. This bridge, dating back to 1917, is where the spirit of the Donkey Lady is said to lurk to this very day. Back in the 60s, locals reported hearing eerie, donkey-like cries near the bridge, and the stories got passed on through the decades.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have Margaret Lorraine Smith. Starting off this list with one of the craziest stories on it, Margaret is quite a dangerous woman. She actually is charged with hiring a man to kill her own husband husband, George Smith. On August 6, 2007, it is said that she hired a man and lured her husband to Surfside Beach late at night. She left George sitting in the sand as the man she hired carried out her evil, horrible plan. Both Margaret and the man she hired were both indicted on these charges in September of 2007. While the hired man was convicted, Margaret herself has been running from her own actions since August 11, 2009. She fled while on bond awaiting the start of her trial. We could ask ourselves all day why she was allowed to be released on bond for such a horrific crime, but at the end of the day, it won't help anyone find her. She was last seen on video at a Walmart in San Antonio getting into a maroon 4-door sedan. There are many rewards being offered for anyone who can provide tips that lead to her arrest, and authorities have also released age-progressed photos to show what she may look like now. Hopefully at some point she is caught and brought to justice for the horrible thing that she did. In our number 9 spot today we have Israel Aguirre. Israel was first arrested in 2002 on the charges of theft as well as being charged for taking someone's life. He was convicted of his theft charge in 2003 and served times at a corrections facility for it. After his sentence was finished, he was deported from the United States before standing trial for the charge related to the killing. In 2005, however, he was arrested once again in Dallas, this time for a different crime as well as for failure to identify himself. He pled no contest and was released on bond. He made a few different court appearances between 2005 and 2007, but eventually he disappeared. On September 9th, 2007, the Kaufman County Sheriff's Office issued a warrant for his arrest for the killing, but he is yet to be seen. In our number
5, Flagpole Hill. Just adjacent to White Rock Lake is a road leading to the infamous Flagpole Hill, the rumored location of a band of rock-hurdling poltergeists. Yep, you heard that right, they just throw rocks at you. Passerbys report driving through the area late at night only to be pelted by a rain of pebbles. When they got out of the car to chase down the culprits, there were none to be found. Local legend identifies the ghost as 3 restless spirits tangled in the dark history of the area. According to the story, a construction worker ended their own life in the house on Flagpole Hill before its completion, and a hired hitman was later convicted of taking out the couple who occupied it. Now, don't think just because you're not in a car, you're safe. Those walking on foot rather than driving past seem to be just as unlucky. Hikers and other residents of the area have reported an unseen assailant pelting them with rocks as they pass by. Sounds like this place really rocks. Get it? Because so funny. Number 4, the Millermore Mansion. Located in Dallas Heritage Village is Millermore Mansion. It was completed in 1857 and was the home of William Brown Miller, who served in the Confederate Army. This beautiful home is said to be haunted by an unidentified lady ghost who always seems to lurk near the nursery. Now, the general belief of who the lady is the spirit of a woman named Emma. Now, Emma was the 3rd wife of William Brown Miller, and allegedly everyone who encounters Emma tells a similar story. People see a woman going up the stairs and they describe the same woman, always wearing a long brown dress. She has been seen in the front foyer, and people claim to have seen her in the middle window where the nursery is. Many Millermore visitors have also reported unexplained cold spots and a distinct feeling of being watched during their visit. Seems like Emma is always watching. Number 3, Sons of Herman Hall. Herman Hall's website marks itself as the oldest freestanding wood structure in Dallas, as well as the oldest bar. And for over 100 years, the hall has held concerts, parties, and dances. So no wonder the dead come back there to party. Both staff members and guests of the hall have reported strange occurrences, especially in late hours of the night. Some guests have seen paintings fly off the wall as thrown by some unseen force. Others have heard footsteps in the hallways and seen doors suddenly slam shut. Guests also claim to hear children laughing, even when no children were present, which is just creepy. Longtime staff members of Herman Hall report sensing a lingering presence and seeing flashes of light and shadow. One particular staff member recounts a time he and some other employees saw a couple dressed in Victorian-era clothing walk past them and go upstairs, but about 30 minutes later, when the couple hadn't returned, the staff went upstairs to find all the doors locked and no one inside them. I just think these ghosts want to return to their party days though. Number 2, Goatman's Bridge. Goatman's Bridge, more formally known as the Old Alton Bridge in Argyll. Dating back to the 1930s, locals have told tales of the specter of a strange half-man, half-goat creature lurking beneath the bridge. The Goatman is said to stand over 7 feet tall with big horns and glowing red eyes, which to me just sounds like the devil, but I mean, hey, Goatman is a cool name. Some believe the Goatman remains dormant for years at a time and awakes only to hunt for prey. Now, the Goatman isn't the only spirit on this bridge, as to keep him company is another spirit, that of a young mother crying out eternally for her lost child. Residents making their way over the bridge late at night have reported hearing her ghostly wails. Some say the two ghosts are connected, and that years ago the Goatman stole the young woman's baby. When she found out, she threw herself from the bridge, and her spirit has haunted it ever since. Now, I already don't like bridges because of heights and being over bodies of water, but being on a haunted bridge, no thank you. And coming in at number 1 is Miss Molly's Hotel. Located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Miss Molly's Hotel is a little deceiving. In the lawless pioneer days of the Old West, Miss Molly's operated as a bordello, making working girls and their customers among the most common apparitions to appear here. One such customer even has a room named after him, the Cowboy Room, where he has been frequently spotted by guests and staff of the hotel. His name is Jake the Cowboy, and when Paula Goins became manager of Miss Molly's, she had no clue that it was haunted. After months, she reported that strange things started happening, and she eventually saw Jake herself. She said, "I saw him in full body. He walked into a room and shut the door behind him, and I went up and knocked on the door and opened the door and no one was there. That is when I knew that something was up, because I'm sitting there thinking, I know I'm not crazy." Another ghost there is assumed to be a former madame by the name of Josie King. Some suspect that she oversaw the house during its bordello days. Josie is seen a lot, usually at 3 a.m. at the foot of the bed, and allegedly Josie likes to watch people sleep. No thanks. Guests can also look at the hotel's collection of creepy photographs or listen to eerie audio recordings captured through the years.
We're starting off this list with what has been dubbed the Lover's Lane case. In 1990, a young couple, Cheryl Henry, 22, and Andy Atkinson, 21, headed out to spend the night together, but they were never seen alive again. Their bodies were found the next day in a wooded area in West Houston known as Lover's Lane. The scene was pretty horrific. There were slash wounds to both of their necks. Andy was found tied to a tree, and Cheryl was found underneath a collapsed fence. Authorities were able to take DNA samples of whoever the assailant was, but they were never able to match it to anyone, meaning most likely this guy had no criminal record. And I do say guy because of the type of DNA they obtained. Over 30 years later, this case has sadly never been solved, and whoever's responsible could still be roaming around out there. The Amber Hagerman case. Amber Hagerman, a 9-year-old girl from Arlington, Texas, was at her grandparents' house on January 13th, 1996. Her and her younger brother were out playing. Amber was on her bicycle and she started riding further and further down the road towards a grocery store. Her brother decided to turn back, but Amber never came back. She'd been taken by a man in a black van in the grocery store parking lot. There was only one witness to her abduction. An intense search effort began, with the community rallying together and law enforcement agencies mobilizing to try and find her. Sadly though, 4 days after her abduction, Amber's body was discovered in a local creek, not a long way from where she was abducted. What makes this case extra tragic is the fact that the assailant has never been found. This tragedy led Amber's mother, Donna Norris, to help establish the Amber Alert system, though, an emergency notification system designed to rapidly disseminate information about abductions to law enforcement agencies, media outlets, and the general public. That's that little ringer thing you get on your phone, the little update. The Amber Alert system has since been adopted and implemented in numerous countries around the world. So if there's anything good that came out of the case, it's that. Next up we have the Killing Fields. This is a stretch of land located in League City near Interstate 45, where numerous bodies have been discovered over the years, leading to one of the most haunting and perplexing mysteries in the state's history. Since the 1970s, law enforcement authorities have uncovered the remains of multiple victims in this desolate area, earning it the chilling nickname. The identity of the assailant or assailants responsible for these deaths remain unknown, and whose victims were primarily young women. Despite extensive investigations, the authorities have struggled to piece together the puzzle and bring the perpetrators to justice. Various theories and speculations have of course emerged over the years, ranging from the involvement of multiple assailants to potential connections with other unsolved crimes in the region. The families of the victims, as well as dedicated investigators, persistently seek answers, hoping to one day unveil the truth and find a bit of closure. The Phantom of Texarkana. The Phantom of Texarkana. Back in the spring of 1946, a series of violent attacks happened in a 10-week time span. Whoever this creep was, they wreaked havoc in the town of Texarkana, going on a rampage of terror. He operated at nighttime, targeting mostly young couples who were just minding their own business, parked in the dark corners of the town. There have been 8 victims, and 5 of which lost their lives. Law enforcement went into overdrive trying to catch this elusive boogeyman, but he managed to slip through their fingers every single time. The whole town was on edge, and folks were locking their doors, looking over their shoulders. The media ate it up, too, referring to it as the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, and the story spread far and wide, making this a pretty infamous case. The Phantom vanished as quickly as he appeared, though, leaving the town and its residents in a state of shock, confusion. Decades have passed, and his true identity still remains a mystery. The Icebox. In June of 1965, the residents of Houston, Texas were left in shock and confusion when the lifeless bodies of Fred and Edwina Rogers were discovered inside their own home. But what made this case truly macabre was the manner in which their bodies were found. They had been stuffed inside the family's refrigerator. The horrifying nature of the crime, coupled with the absence of any clear motive or suspects, has propelled the case into this realm of mystery. Investigations into the Icebox case were met with numerous baffling elements. The lack of forced entry suggested that the assailant was either known to the victims or possessed an intricate knowledge of their routines. The home had also been meticulously cleaned after the attack, which made, gathering up evidence pretty difficult. And there was also this absence of a clear motive, which really added another layer of intrigue to it, leaving the investigators grasping at straws for answers. Over the years, theories surrounding the Icebox case have circulated. Some speculate that the crime was a result of a family dispute, while others entertain the possibility that someone could have been hired to commit the act. And then, of course, there are those who hypothesize that the assailant may have simply been a deranged individual who really had no motive and attacked them completely at random. At number 5 on the list, we have the televangelist bomber. This disturbing case began back in January of 1990 when a mysterious package was sent to Lakewood Church in Houston. The daughter of Pastor John Osteen opened the package and it exploded. Luckily, she survived, but received third-degree burns and cuts to her legs and abdomen. In April of that same year, a second package was sent. This one to the Christian Broadcasting Network in Virginia, where a security guard named Scott Sheepers almost lost his life. The package had looked suspicious, and the TV station had received death threats before, so they were on pretty high alert in general. They put the package through an x-ray machine. Sheepers didn't spot anything out of the ordinary at first, but something about it still seemed off to him. He went to cut into part of the box before taking a couple steps back, at which point the package exploded and sending Sheepers flying to the floor. He was transported to the hospital where shrapnel was removed from his leg, and he did survive. Both packages had been sent from Fayetteville, North Carolina. Until this day, the identity of the sender has never been found.
And White Rock Lake. White Rock Lake is an area that is filled with many legends. It's home to the ghost of the Lady of the Lake. Years ago, a young couple was driving home from a party along the lake late one night. The two were tired and ready to go home when the wife suddenly screamed at her husband to stop the car. A young woman in a long white gown had appeared in the road before them. The couple asked the woman if she needed a ride and she accepted. They drove on, and all while the wife could hear the steady drip, drip, drip of water. But once they reached the address the woman had given them, they turned around to find her gone, leaving behind only a puddle. Confused, the couple got out at the address and knocked on the door. An elderly man answered. They told the man about the young woman they had just picked up, and he sighed and told them they were not the first couple to come knocking on his door late at night. The woman they had picked up was his daughter, who had drowned in White Rock Lake 10 years earlier. The Lady of the Lake has been spotted and even picked up many times since, and continues to haunt White Rock Lake in her white gown, looking for a way back home, and this is just sad. Number 9. Adolphus Hotel. The Adolphus Hotel was built on the former site of Dallas's original city hall in 1912, and the hotel has a reputation as one of the city's most prominent historical landmarks. In addition to being the oldest hotel in the city, it's no surprise it's also among the most haunted. One of the most famous spirits here is an apparition who appears in a 1930s era white wedding gown, the spirit of a jilted bride who was supposed to have been married in one of the hotel's glamorous ballrooms on the 19th floor, but ended up taking her own life at the hotel instead when her groom left her at the altar. Ever since that night, guests staying on the 19th floor report hearing a woman crying, footsteps running up and down the hall, and even the sound of rope creaking under the strain of a body. The bride spirit has been spotted wandering the halls after events and parties, still wearing her white dress and veil. Again, this is just incredibly sad. Staff and guests of the hotel also report an eerie feeling of being watched or of a presence in the room with them. Now, not all ghost residents have sad backstories, as many are believed to be former guests who checked in again during the afterlife because they had such a good time in the hotel back in their days among the living. Guess it's a cool place to be in life and death. Number 8. The Coombs Creek Trail. Located in Oak Cliff, this trail offers a serene, scenic path along Coombs Creek for nature lovers to enjoy, but everything is not as it seems, as this trail has an eerie history. Years ago, a young girl named Mary would ride her bike every day along the trail, but one day Mary never returned home. It's still unknown whether Mary drowned in the creek, was struck by a passing train, or was taken, but she seems to have disappeared without a trace. Hikers still report seeing the figure of a young girl riding her bike dangerously close to the edge of the water, but when they call out to warn her, she vanishes into thin air. Others have reported seeing a small ghostly face of a young girl peeking at them from behind a tree. When they try to move closer to investigate, the face disappears. Then the face reappears further along the trail, inviting the hiker to follow her deeper and deeper into the woods. And if a ghost child is trying to get me to go deeper in the woods, I'm just gonna turn around and leave. Number 7. The Majestic Theater. The Majestic Theater is located on Elm Street in downtown Dallas. Elm Street? No, I've seen that movie before. Now, in the 1910s, it housed live vaudevillian performances before transitioning to screening films in 1922. The Majestic remained in business until the 1970s, and then its doors were reopened for live performances in 1983 after it landed on the National Register of Historic Places. Some say the theater's original owner, Carl Hopitzel, still haunts the building, making sure things run according to his liking. One former employee claims he shared an office space with Carl during his time there. He reports that one of his responsibilities each night was to ensure that the door in his office leading to the theater was locked, but each morning when he showed up for work, the door was wide open, and a strange chill would permeate from the room. When he mentioned this to his manager, he laughed and explained that this was only Carl, who liked to use the door to get into the theater and check up on things. Weird smells, stage props inexplicably moving, and a light hanging above the balcony illuminating on its own own have all been attributed to Corll. His spirit is rumored to linger there to this day, making sure his theater runs smoothly and maybe catching a show or two. Number 6. Snuffers Restaurant on Greenville Avenue. Snuffers is a popular local chain that serves classic American food, or at least that's what it says when I Google it. But the location on Greenville Avenue serves up a lot more than just burgers. Customers and staff of the Dallas restaurant claim that the place is seriously haunted. Before Snuffers, there was an Easy Parlor. It seems that a man was badly injured after hours when a fight broke out at an employee party. He then stumbled into the bathroom where he drew his final breaths. Years later, once Easy Parlor became Snuffers, the managers would sit at a table by the bathrooms each night to finish up closing paperwork. As they sat in the dark, near-empty restaurant, they would listen as antagonized, stumbling footsteps made their way to the bathroom, then watch as the door creaked open by itself and never shut. In 2013, the original building was demolished and reconstructed, but reports of strange happenings didn't stop. Other employees have since reported feeling cold gusts of wind rush by them and doors slamming shut all on their own. Sounds like a dinner and a show to me.
Next up at number 6, the Milgram experiment. Named after the psychologist Stanley Milgram, who spearheaded the experiment, this study began in the summer of 1961, and it looked at testing the limits of obedience. Many academics at the time wanted to take a look into what was at the core of an authoritative personality, and how someone could be swayed to commit something that ultimately they didn't want to do simply because they believed they had to. A newspaper advertisement was sent out, but the details were not provided until test subjects arrived. Once the study began, the two groups were separated. One group was assigned to be an actor, and the other group was tasked with shocking the person in the room after they answered a question wrong. What group 2 didn't know was that group 1 was not actually being shocked, just acting as if they were. And as it turns out, an incredibly high proportion of the subjects continued to shock the group despite thinking they were hurting them, simply because they felt they had no other choice. And later, another scientist thought the experiment needed to be amped up, as he hypothesized people could have felt the victim was faking it. The new study included real-life dogs as the subjects, being shocked, and test subjects apparently openly wept while still following orders to shock the dogs, apparently proving that many humans will follow orders to a fault. Coming in at number 5, radiation. After World War II, there were many questions surrounding radioactive materials and the effects these could have on humans moving forward. Well, apparently they decided the best people to test out this incredibly harmful and dangerous study on would of course be pregnant women. Medical researchers fed radioactive edibles in the form of energy drinks to 829 pregnant women, and not only didn't they tell them what they were giving them, but they straight up lied and said that it would actually improve the health of their babies. Many of the women in the study became incredibly ill, would get covered in rashes and bruises, and some ultimately ended up developing cancer. But worst of all is that many of the fetuses were in fact born with leukemia or other forms of cancer, and the mothers didn't even know that they had been involved in an experiment in the first place. That was until it was much too late. Coming in at number 4, the syphilis study. Back in 1932, the United States Public Health Service began to dive into the natural progression of syphilis if left untreated. And listen, I understand that these kinds of experiments provide us with knowledge of how to help protect people in the future, but what I'm saying is that there are better ways to go about it. In this study, 600 poor and illiterate men, of which only 399 previously had syphilis, were hired, and none of them were told about what the experiment was going to be for, or that they had a life-threatening disease in the first place. The 600 men were instead told that they were actually receiving free healthcare, meals, and burial insurance in exchange for their participation. What's even more sick is that even though penicillin was proven to be an effective cure in 1947, the study continued all the way until 1972, essentially needlessly infecting hundreds of people and watching them die of a disease that already had a cure. I mean, it's just insane that this went on for so long, and it's definitely one of the most evil experiments to have seen the light of day. Coming in at number 3, eugenics. Prior to World War II, there was actually many places around the United States that were pro-eugenics. Of course, this all changed after the infamous evil experiments performed in the war, but rewind to 1907 and it was actually widely accepted across the nation. Firstly, sterilization was enacted as a hypothesis to help reduce crime rates and stop mental disabilities. And then not long after, they began to bring race in as a factor in the hopes to improve genetic stock through the sterilization of unpreferred races. Because it is women who give birth, they were often the victims of these experiments, as eugenicists believed it was the best way to protect and regulate birth rates and weed out who they didn't want to be able to reproduce. Although it was first overturned in 1921, by 1927 the Supreme Court actually ruled in favor of forced sterilization, believing it would create a better society for us all to live in. I mean, it's truly horrid that this was not only legal, but encouraged by so many. Coming in at number 2, a cure for insanity. 1907 seems to have been a busy year for evil scientists, but rather than eugenics, this doctor believed he could actually cure insanity. Dr. Henry Cotton was convinced that internal organs, upon developing an infection, were the root cause of mental disorders. So Cotton got involved with the asylum and got to researching on what he refers to as patients, but really were victims of his cruel experiments. He believed that by removing the infected organ, he could not only cure his patients of their disorders, but then study that organ for further research. And that's all well and fine if you're dealing with maybe a root canal, but when it comes to vital organs, it's not the same story. Dubbed surgical bacteriology, the procedures were often done without the patient's consent, and he would remove teeth, tonsils, and even colons and other organs of the like. To further prove his point, he even removed his own teeth along with his wife and sons too, which, I mean, if he was trying to prove a point, does that mean he thought he was insane? Because why else would he remove his teeth? But in the end, 49 of his patients died, which he chalked up to end-stage psychosis, and to this day the project is viewed as incredibly cruel. Last up in our number 1 spot, the Aversion Project. Led by Dr. Aubrey Levin, this program identified homosexual soldiers from the army and subjected them to horrific medical tortures as a means to try and change their sexual orientation. Now, at the time, it was believed that being gay was a disease that could be and should be cured, and so the experiment to convert soldiers began. The experiment lasted between 1971 to 1989, and the soldiers were submitted to extensive electric shock treatment while being forced to view explicit images of the same sex, trying to cause their brain to make negative associations with homosexuality. When the subjects didn't change, or at least didn't admit to changing their sexual orientation, they would force the victims into sex-changing operations, making them effectively straight women in their eyes. Reportedly, 900 gay men between 16 to 24 were surgically changed into women against their will, and once the experiment was shut down, Levin fled to Canada and denied ever being a part of the cruel and evil experiment.
Sticking in El Paso, in our number 5 spot is the Plaza Theater Performing Arts Center. As someone who loves the theater, I try to see as many shows as I can, but I think I'll skip visiting this theater, no matter how good the production is. Built in 1930 as a movie house, demolished for a parking lot in the late 80s, and rebuilt as a live theater space, this building has seen many changes, but some things have stayed constant throughout its history. Many workers of the building have reported seeing a man in one of the box seats, in a tuxedo, smoking a cigarette. One crew member recalls seeing him after turning on the stage lights, sitting alone in the box, as though he'd been there for hours already before the lights came on. And when she saw the smoking man, he turned to her and said, "We all have our time to die," and then threw himself headfirst over the balcony, vanishing before he could hit the ground. A former vice president of the theater also recalls seeing a ghostly girl bouncing a ball in the aisles of the theater and always staring. He also noticed that there was a rag doll that seemed to appear and disappear on its own, moving to locations that it couldn't have without someone's help. Even locked doors didn't seem to stop it from appearing in the projection booth. Number 4. Yorktown Memorial Hospital. Established in 1951, this abandoned hospital has been named one of the most haunted places in America. And since over 2,000 patients are said to have died within its walls before it shuttered its doors in 1992, I can see why. Reports of apparitions of people in hospital gowns running through the corridors or hiding in rooms are numerous, along with moving wheelchairs, disembodied voices, and footsteps. But there are some who have even more chilling stories. While exploring the halls and rooms that have remained largely untouched since its closure, some ghost hunters have been touched, had their clothes tugged on, or even pushed to the ground while being given a ghostly warning. Some of the spirits are believed to be that of patients who had illegal medical experiments performed on them and lost their lives in the process, making for a very vengeful ghost. Number 3. The Screaming Bridge in Arlington. On the night of February 4th, 1961, 6 from the local high school were taking a drive after seeing a movie earlier in the evening. While driving down Bedford Road toward the rail crossing bridge, which had mysteriously been burned down a few years previous, only rebuilt earlier that year, they were startled by another car reversing and honking its horn wildly. This caused the driver to speed up out of fear, and not realizing that the bridge was out, the car careened over the edge and crashed into the other side of the ravine. Unfortunately, 3 of them lost their lives that night, and their screams of terror can still be heard by anyone traveling the renamed Greenbelt Road. The saddest part of this story is that the car that startled them was being driven by a man who had just barely avoided going over the edge of the broken bridge himself, and he was reversing and honking to warn them of the danger ahead. The entire area, now known as Death Crossing, is now blocked off and no traffic travels through.
This next story is actually kind of funny, I think. The Dancing Devil. If you're a San Antonio local, let me know if you've heard of this one, because it's pretty bizarre. On Halloween night in 1975, a man walked into El Camaroncito nightclub. It was an unforgettable night, but not in the way anyone was expecting or wanted. This mystery man was apparently an incredible dancer. The ladies were blown away by his incredible moves. They all wanted to dance with him. But at one point in the night, one of his dance partners happened to look down at the man's feet, and suddenly everyone heard this loud shriek. I picture the music stopping, everyone's just freezing, looking over. The woman had looked down at the man to see that his feet had transformed. Some said they looked like chicken feet, others described them more as hooves. The man then rushed into the bathroom and was never seen again. Some say he'd climbed out of the bathroom window, running off into the night, but there was also smoke left behind with a strange sulfur-like smell. The building is no longer a nightclub. It's changed hands a number of times, but the story of the Dancing Devil continued to be told, and staff at the building would say that there was a lingering sulfuric smell, especially in the men's bathroom. Next, we have the tale of the fang creature of Old Pearsall Road. Back in the 60s, a group of friends were driving home late one night along Old Pearsall Road. And by the way, if I'm pronouncing anything incorrectly, you let me know in the I already know you're gonna let me know in the comments. Anyway, they were driving along the road. They'd had a few drinks, this group of friends, and suddenly the driver swerved, convinced that he'd seen a little person in a white shirt and diaper with red stains around its mouth. After regaining their composure, the group continued on home. The next day, though, the driver just couldn't get the image of whatever that thing was out of his mind. Had he just imagined it? Was it an animal of some kind? Or even worse, was there actually a little youngster alone in the middle of the road that night that he almost ran over? He decided to drive back out there to take a look. But once he reached the spot, he realized he'd suffered a flat tire. He got out of the car to find 2 puncture marks on it. He changed the tire and then settled back into his car. He hadn't gotten a great sleep the night before, so he started to drift off, still pulled over on the side of the road. But then he woke up to a sharp pain on his neck. In complete horror, he realized the creature from the night before was now perched on his lap. Legend has it that the driver's sister later had a dream where he warned her never to venture down Old Pearsall Road. Bowden Road in Huntsville is sometimes referred to ominously as Demon's Road. There's a lot said to go on here. Seriously, be careful driving along this road alone at night, because it sounds like you're taking a real risk. For starters, you have a ghost boy with glowing red eyes that's said to ride around on a tricycle and drag you to hell. Some people will claim to to spot mysterious red lights and orbs along the road. There's a faceless monster that's said to stalk people walking or driving along it. And then there's the graveyard. Martha Chapel Cemetery. One story goes that in 2001, a man from Houston decided to visit the Martha Chapel Cemetery with his buddy. They parked near the graveyard. The driver stepped out of the car. His friend appeared to be sleeping in the passenger seat and he didn't want to disturb him. So the man started walking through the cemetery. But he noticed something strange happening near one of the graves. The ground seemed to be moving. Suddenly, a hand reached up out of the ground and grabbed him on the ankle, but his friend ended up rushing over to help, and together they managed to break free and kick the hand back down into the ground. They ran back to the car, but suddenly the driver froze. His friend was actually still in the car. He'd been asleep the whole time. At least that's what it looked like. It wasn't until they were about a mile down Demon's Road that the driver realized his friend was actually dead. He'd suffered a heart attack while en route to the cemetery. We head to Corpus Christi, Texas now with the USS Lexington, a decommissioned World War II aircraft carrier that now operates as a museum, a supposedly very haunted museum. People will claim to spot shadow figures. There are also the full apparitions of two sailors, one that will help guide lost visitors back to the deck before disappearing, and one that likes to hang out in the engine room, explaining how the turbines work before vanishing into thin air. The museum official described one of the strangest things they'd ever experienced on the carrier involving their pen caps, saying, "I always use a ballpoint pen, and over the course of a few weeks, I lost about 6 pen caps off my desk. The day I lost the 6th pen cap, I turned over my office looking for them. My office was spotless by the time I was through. It wasn't until I returned to my office the next morning I found all 6 pen caps laying side by side right in front of my computer keyboard." Finally, we have another haunted Corpus Christi hotspot, Center Theater. Legend has it that the spirit of a woman employed as an usher at this theater still lingers to this day, bound to the theater after a terrible accident. According to the story, the woman died at the hands of her jealous lover. As she exited the women's restroom on the upper floor near the mezzanine, she was fatally stabbed, her white uniform now stained in red. Visitors to the theater have reported strange things, especially in the area near the top of the stairs overlooking the seats. It's said that this is where the woman's ghost is most likely to be spotted. But she doesn't like people hanging around up there. Some are lucky to only feel an unexplained chill in the air. Others say they've been pushed, only to turn around and find that there's nobody else with them up there, at least no one living.